Thank you for listening to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Sign up to our Patreon to receive bonus content, live streams, and our weekly newsletter with money off books and museum visits as well, plus early access to all live show tickets. That's patreon.com/wehaveways.
Life is full of things to manage. Your work, your family, your plans, and your treatment. Consider Kesimpta, ofatumumab 20 milligram injection. You can take it yourself from the comfort of home. If you're ready for something different, ask your healthcare provider about Kesimpta and check out the details at kesimpta.com. Brought to you by Novartis Pharmaceuticals Corporation.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
You know, as well as I do, there are a lot of bloody Germans coming at us. Well, all we can do is stay here and hang on in the hope that somebody catches us up. We must fight for our lives and stick together. We've fought the Germans before in North Africa, Sicily, Italy. They weren't good enough for us then, and they're bloody well not good enough for us now. They're up against the finest soldiers in the world. An hour from now, you will take up defensive positions north of the road outside. Make certain you dig in well and that your weapons and ammo are in good order. We're getting short of ammo, so when you shoot to kill. Good luck to you all. That was, of course, Major Dickie Lonsdale in the Oudekerk at the bottom of the Oosterbeek perimeter, inspiring the chaps in Lonsdale Force.
Yes, and that's now in big pencil on a door, isn't it?
It is, because it was used for Dickie Lonsdale to reenact Dickie Lonsdale speech, playing the role of Dickie Lonsdale in the church for Theirs Is the Glory, the bizarre Arnhem reenactment film starring Dickie Lonsdale as Dickie Lonsdale.
But obviously we like to show that we're a broad-minded, broad church kind of podcast and that we look at things 360.
Other side of the hill.
So here's a German perspective.
Yeah.
The pause to hand over the wounded really emphasises what a nonsense war is. We all checked our watches and it became quiet. The British paras came out. Words were exchanged and a few cigarettes thrown across. We had plenty to offer, as many of their supplies had landed in our lines. I looked at them, and they looked at us, and I thought, we have never seen each other before. Had nothing against them, nor they against us. Yes. SS Corporal Wolfgang Dombrowski, Panzer Pioneer Battalion. Apart from the fact that he's a filthy SS swine, of course. Nothing against him whatsoever.
I mean, the Dickie Lonsdale words are at least in the heat of the moment. This is a fellow looking black and trying to be reflective. I mean, yeah, sure, mate, is how I feel about that. But there we are. But so, welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk for the penultimate part, because we're going to do a load of wash-up, I think, after this.
Yeah, and we are when we go out there, and we're going to record some stuff when we're out there for the actual 80th anniversary. But this is very much the final episode in our 6-part kind of formal series on Market Garden.
And what we're looking at is the struggle from Wednesday the 20th through to the following Monday in what has become by this point the Oosterbeek perimeter. Now, Oosterbeek is the small village, rather well-to-do village, to the west of Arnhem. There's a sort of mile gap between Arnhem and Oosterbeek, and then you get the bulk of the village. But actually, the first airborne perimeter is on the far western side of Oosterbeek itself. There are some houses to the north that are to the left, if you look on the map of the main village, and then the spine of the defensive position runs down the western edge of Oosterbeek itself.
I think it's fair to say that Oosterbeek is, a place of well-appointed villas and comfortable family homes, affording a magnificent panorama of the surrounding countryside, as they say in estate agents speak.
Exactly, and lots of beds and breakfasts for you to go walking in the lovely parkland around there. But at this point, it's none of those things. It's an absolute maelstrom of violence, wild improbability. It's a charnel house. The situation, first thing on the Wednesday morning, is 4th Parachute Brigade, who on the Tuesday attempted to bust into Arnhem across the northern axis along the railway line, north of the railway line. They retreat, and they've had a very bad day. In fact, the division has pretty much been eaten within 24 hours of arriving in Arnhem. So 10 para and 156 para are now between the railway line, that runs up away from Arnhem on a diagonal, closer to the level crossing at Wolfhazer where they came through, and 156 Para are sort of further east, but they're not within the perimeter. They're not within the Easterbeek perimeter as it's formed. They've dug in and stopped for the night. Shan Hackett is with the men. There's the sound of half-tracks and AFVs moving about in the night. So they know the Germans are looking for them, and there's sporadic firing and all that sort of stuff. But the perimeter is now formed down the western edge of Oosterbeek. There's a hospital set up in the Schoonord Hotel, which is on the corner of the main road. There's another dressing station, a school over the road from there, and then the Tafelberg Hotel, which is further down the road, which was Modal's headquarters when the 1st Airborne first land. This is now the front line of Schoonord. The Germans are coming down the Utrechtsweg from the east with self-propelled guns and stuff.
And the Utrechtsweg is the kind of main drag that leads from Oosterbeek to Arnhem or the other way around.
And it's a great big wide thoroughfare. This is a very wide road that can accommodate trams and traffic. And again, with these rather nice, well-to-do houses and hotels and stuff along it going into Arnhem itself, it's sort of a wooded.
Yes, it's leafy, isn't it? A wide leafy boulevard, effectively.
Exactly. And what it is now is a wide leafy boulevard with wrecked jeeps, stugs. There's a 17-pounder further back from the corner of the crossroads that's trying to plug stuff coming down. You've got 6-pounder crews sort of freelancing, running around trying to deal with German army, particularly a Polish crew who are running around with a 6-pounder, who came in the day before in the disastrous lift the day before. Now, in the Schoonord, because it's on the front line, the hospital is being fought over, mortared, shelled, and the wounded are lying in their beds and being hurt as they lie in the beds. Among the wounded is the Roman Catholic chaplain Benson, who's lost his arm, and he dies. It's awful, this story. He dies because he loses the will to live because he knows he can't administer Mass anymore. He can't deliver the sacrament, so he dies on the 27th. I mean, it's awful. And there's a dressing station in the south down at Kate ter Horst's house, which is a prominent house that sticks up along the river road in the south of Oosterbeek.
And who's Kate ter Horst?
She's this woman who volunteers to help.
But I mean, so when they say Kate ter Horst's house, that's like saying Al's house or Jim's house.
It's like Jim Holland's house.
Okay, but it might actually be 532 Utrecht.
Yeah, exactly. And she's come to prominence as a person in the Arnhem story because she would read prayers to the men and, read the Bible to the men and, turned her house over into a dressing station. Jimmy Clemenson, for instance, who's the fellow that was in the loft with
the dodgy moustache.
Exactly. He ends up back in the defence of Arnhem, and there's allotments and stuff around the southern bit of Oosterbeek where Lonsdale Force is, and he is injured and then injured again in the shoulder in Kate ter Horst's house, gets a piece of mortar in his shoulder.
Bloody hell.
I mean, all those years ago when I spoke to him, he said, that was the one that really hurt, you see. The piece of shrapnel in the shoulder blade.
Well, one can imagine.
Ghastly. But on the Wednesday, they are up over the brow of the hill from the church in the southern part of the perimeter. And there's a road, a Acacia Lawn, that winds down towards the church.
Yes.
Where the music hall is and and where the guns are dug in.
I remember that.
Exactly. And this is where Lance Sergeant Jack Baskerfield, who's a butcher from Stoke-on-Trent, he's involved in this force, and he's a South Stafford's guy.
Right.
Lonsdale Force has previously been Thompson Force because of Sheriff Thompson, who goes forward and galvanises the men who are retreating from the town on the Tuesday.
Sheriff is first name, not position.
Exactly. He's a lieutenant colonel. Sheriff is simply what he's known as. But basically, they're divided up, and Lonsdale withdraws the parachute infantry at one point, the 11 Para, 1 Para, and 3 Para men. The South Staffs are left to sort of cover for themselves. And the Germans at this point decide to press on the Wednesday. And with AFVs and riflemen and with a proper combined arms attack.
This is from the east, from Arnhem.
From the east, from Arnhem.
But what we've got here is a sort of lozenge, haven't we?
Thumb shape, even.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so narrow at the centre. The problem at the centre for the Germans could be one of overshooting. If they range their mortars wrong from the eastern side or the western side, they may strike their own guys the other side of the perimeter.
I mean, it's like half a mile wide, isn't it?
Yeah. If they shoot long. So Baskerfield is with 2 gun detachments with the 6-pounders covering this approach over the Acacia Line. And the Germans push very hard. The crews he's with are killed. He's injured. Baskerfield drags himself across the road and with the second gun finishes off the German armoured assault.
Wow.
But this is how desperate the fighting is, you see.
Of course.
I mean, one of the interesting things about the airborne 6-pounder is its shield has been modified to fit it in a glider, so it offers the crew less protection.
Yeah.
Because they've had to take the sort of gasket off the bottom. So these are the ranges they're fighting at.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the citation reads, "The superb gallantry of this NCO is beyond praise. During the remaining days at Arnhem, stories of his valour were a constant inspiration to all ranks. He spurned danger, ignored pain, and by supreme fighting spirit infected all who witnessed his conduct with the same aggressiveness and dogged devotion to duty which characterised his actions throughout." I mean, I've always thought there are 5 VCs for Arnhem, which is a mark of the degree of how bad it is, or what a disaster it is. You know,
This one seems like it's well earned, though.
I mean, it's absolutely desperate, and they're hanging on. And so Dickie Lonsdale, who we heard from earlier, he's the second in command of 11 Power. He'd been injured in his hand on arrival at Arnhem. Stuart Mawson, who's the RMO in 11 Power, dressed his hand. He said, "I haven't got time for aid stations," but he doesn't end up in the town with the battalion.
Right.
He's held back. And this is how fast things are happening. You know, he's injured on the Monday, tended to on the Monday evening, misses out on Tuesday's fighting, and then is plugged into the fighting on Wednesday. Because things are moving that quickly. He stepped up to take charge of the composite force, but by the end of the day, they've withdrawn to the area in front of the church, east of the church. They've come off the high ground, basically, because they just can't hold it any longer.
Keep it going.
Exactly. It sticks out as a sort of extrusion, so it offers the German a flank that can be nipped out. So they withdraw. Now, Robert Kane, who we met in Arnhem, in the town, in the Battle of the Monastery, he's among them, Major Robert Kane, and he's another South Staffs. He's literally lobbing Piat bombs over buildings at tanks. He's using it as a mortar.
Amazing, isn't it?
At one point, a round goes off.
So literally holding up the Piat at an angle.
Boink, firing over things.
Yeah.
But at one point, the bomb goes off in the Piat as he fires it, and he's blinded.
Jeez.
"I think I'm blinded," he screams. He says, "I blubbered like a baby." And then he recovers, leaves the dressing station, and goes back to stalking tanks, and becomes a sort of legendary figure in that sector of the battlefield, turning up suddenly, dealing with the enemy.
But isn't it also interesting how you have how courage isn't a straight line, is it?
No.
I mean, you know, you have your moments, which Kane does, where, you know, he's completely forthright and courageous and leading the men forward into town. Then he has his moments of kind of complete breaking down and losing the plot.
Yeah.
Then he's blubbing like a baby. And the next minute he's past all that and he turns into this absolute legend of the Oosterbeek perimeter.
He's absolutely,
indefatigable.
Yeah, he's extraordinary.
It is literally like a switch has gone off in his brain, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the kind of the concerns, the doubts, maybe it's a kind of fatalism that kicks in. You just think, what the heck?
Well, we're dead already anyway.
Dead already, so might as well, kind of thing. I don't know. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, there's no accounting for courage, is there, in how people respond?
There is no accounting for courage.
What is it that makes, Baskerville do what he does? I mean, is his action, is his sacrifice of his life, is that going to save the war? No. It's just amazing.
It is extraordinary. Well, and Kane famously was Jeremy Clarkson's ex-father-in-law.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And he never mentioned it. He never talked about it. Never said, "Oh, yes, by the way, I've got a Victoria Cross and this is how I got it." Apparently it never came up.
Yeah, amazing.
It's extraordinary. But so in the north, these mixed units from 4th Parachute Brigade, they start to try and fall back, but it's really bad. One party of 130 men are surrounded and captured. By 1:30, 10 Para under Colonel Smith get back into the perimeter. 60 of his 600 men that he brought up remaining.
Wow.
They land at 1400 hours on the Monday, and 48 hours later, there's 60 remaining of his.
Yeah, it's just terrible, isn't it?
They've been captured and they've been wounded.
They're not all dead.
They're not all dead, but this is the extent to which their combat coherence remains. 150 men, Hackett's leading what's left of 156 Para, and they get stuck in a hollow that's some 400 metres west of the perimeter.
And we know where that is, don't we? We know where Hackett's hollow is.
We'll go and have a look.
Great.
And he's got a Mauser at this point. And he goes, well, we can see the British positions 400 metres away. They're basically under constant mortar and machine gun fire. So he goes, all right then, let's go. And they run in a sort of howling bayonet charge with everyone's blood up. And Geoffrey Powell writes about this, about how pumped they all are and absolutely wild with rage and fervour. And they break out, and the Germans are, terrified when it finally happens, terrified of it. And they get into the perimeter and are then sent into the perimeter and are put in on the crossroads north of where the hospital is, on the western side of the main road. And Hackett's told to get a night's rest. So Urquhart says to him, you go and have a night's rest. You need a night's rest. Because I think by this point, he is also completely fried. Hackett, in the meantime, has done something wildly brave. So there's a moment where, to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, Heathcote Amory, he's going to be a Tory Chancellor of the Exchequer in the 1960s, this guy. He's on a jeep that's on fire, and Hackett basically gets up, walks straight over. He's wounded, Heathcote Emery, picks him up, puts him over his shoulder and walks away, even though the jeep could blow at any second. This is the paradox with Hackett is, if you listen to our episode about the Tuesday, and this is the thing I kind of get into in my book, is that he makes some very, very odd decisions and sort of acts in a very kind of headstrong, wild way, I think, on arrival in Arnhem. But you absolutely cannot fault the man's guts, his bravery, his ability to keep it together when actually the shit's hitting the fan. I mean, he's an extraordinary fellow in that regard. It's just how he behaves when he comes into divisional headquarters on the, 1 o'clock on Tuesday morning is kind of like, well, what are you doing? But he then is, fighting as an infantryman. Yes, he's in charge, but in charge of what? I mean, his brigade's been whittled down to only a few people. But anyway, so they're now in the perimeter.
Yep.
Urquhart at headquarters knows there's no point trying to get through to Frost. And he knows this.
That's gone. And
Frost by this point has been injured as well. So he's injured in the legs by a mortar. So Freddie Goff of the Recce Squadron is now in charge at the bridge. And there's this most amazing thing where, because see, the landlines, as we would call them, the phones are still working in Arnhem. The Germans haven't cut them all. There is on the Monday morning this amazing thing where the dentist at the St. Elizabeth Hospital goes out into the phone booth outside the hospital and calls divisional headquarters, calls the Hartenstein, rings up and tells them how it's going with the fighting all around him, crashes and bangs off and he goes, we're doing fine here. Thanks very much. So don't worry. Bang, crash, wallop. So
it's a little bit lively at times.
Exactly. Similar conversation. So Freddie Goff's reputation with Urquhart is that he's always late for briefings. So he calls on the phone and he says, because they're obviously being cagey because they think they're being listened to. Goff rings up and says, it's the man who's always late, right?
I mean, imagine having the sang-froid to describe yourself as that with a wry sense of humour while all this is going on. I mean, it's just
as the buildings burn around you and tiger tanks are popping up. And anyway, this is how Urquhart describes it. Briefly, Goff explained why he'd been prevented from contacting me before and gave me a broad picture of the situation at the bridge. I told him to pass on my personal congratulations on a fine effort to everyone concerned, and then gave him to understand, as best I could without going into detail, that the rest of the division was in poor shape. I'm afraid, I said, you can only hope for relief from the south. For the moment, we can only try to preserve what we have left.
Sorry, old man, you're on your own.
Exactly.
Thank you, sir. Well, you can rely on us to do our very best.
We'll do our very best, sir. You're doing
Is it farewell or adieu?
You're doing awfully well. There is actually an audio recording of Urquhart. It's on Spotify from October where he sums it all up. And you can hear the strain in the guy's voice and everything. But it is all in these terms. And the fellows on the guns did awfully well under extremely difficult circumstances.
Oh, why aren't we like that anymore? It's just such a shame.
Well, I don't know. But then there's the supply drop comes in. That's another disaster. They've managed to contact the UK and ask for the drop zone to be moved to buy outside the Hartenstein. But the enemy uses flares and markers to distract and confuse. 10 of the 164 planes that come to drop supplies are shot down. So at the bridge, fighting continues. Everything's on fire. The men are digging into the gardens, but there's no fields of fire in the gardens behind the houses. German mortar fire is relentless. And, those who know their Northwest Europe casualty statistics know that, 80% of injuries are caused by mortars in Northwest Europe in the British Army. And tanks are able to simply pull up at the houses and shoot into them like the day before.
Yeah, with nothing to stop them. I mean...
Yeah, because the gun crews can't come outside. They've run out of Piat ammunition. Like I said, Frost is injured in the legs by a mortar bomb. Goff takes over. There's a 2-hour truce organised in the late afternoon, and the wounded, including Frost, are taken into captivity.
That's amazing, isn't it? So that's him gone.
That's him gone.
How bad is Frost then?
His legs are smashed up.
He's in a bad way.
He's in a bad way, yeah. During all this, there's an attempt to sort of break out, and Lieutenant Jack Graben, who people may remember from the first night where he tries to cross the bridge, he's been shot in the shoulder. And he's been completely leading from the front, wild disrespect for danger and, and his own safety and all that. And he's seen running in front of a tank with a pistol, covering his men's retreat. One of the other officers shouts to him, "Goodbye, dear boy, goodbye." And then he's killed.
Jeepers.
Tony Hibbert, who's the brigade major, again, he's someone, all those years ago when we did Road to Berlin, I interviewed him, and he was a fantastic, sort of tall, phlegmatic, posh gentleman. He was, Oh, it's most inconvenient when a tiger tank pulls up to a building and fires into it. Things like that.
Frightful bore.
Frightful bore. Yeah, it's one of those people. So he recalled, we had by this time about 300 wounded in the cellars, but I still believed that 30 Corps would be coming up the South Bank within a matter of almost hours. And damn, if we couldn't hear them. At 8 o'clock, I realised that our little battle was finished. We just didn't have the ammunition. When the other side can run tanks right up to your front window with no chance of retaliating, there comes a moment when you can't go on.
Can't argue that, can you? But I think also that, what you can sense there is probably in their heart of hearts, they all know that, a lot earlier than that it's buggered.
Oh, yeah.
You can't admit to these things, to yourself or to your fellows. You've got to hold on to that belief that 30 Corps is going to come in.
Of course, because otherwise there's no point to any of it, is there? If you believe they're not coming, well, we'll give up. Yeah. And there's no point in it. So by 0500 on Thursday morning, organised resistance at the bridge is over. But there are men in rooms with fighting knives, like hanging on, trying to slit Germans' throats. In later years, Walter Harzer claimed that during the final hours of fighting, his men intercepted a radio message sent from the bridge that ends with the sentence, "Out of ammunition, God save the king." But that's that's gone into sort of mythic space, because certainly the people with the working radios, so the artillery, there's a moment where they've got their radio set and they've got it all working. They've been talking to division, where that building goes up in flames, and the bombardier who's in charge of the radio turns to his officer and says, "What about the radio, sir?" Because he's thinking, "What about the radio, sir?" Because that's his job. Yeah. And he's told to fuck the radios and get out of here, because there's no point. So after this, come Thursday, things in Oosterbeek fall into a pattern.
Yes.
And you get the daily hate, which is a severe mortaring at first light when everyone stands to, then probing attacks. And the Germans are finding it very hard on the eastern side as the streets are very confined. And in fact, they bring king tigers up that are too big for the street, cause the roadways to collapse and everything. So then they're not much use.
They're not small tanks, to be fair.
No. And on the western side, the border regiment are well dug in and have the benefit of being essentially intact and are sort of together. But it's raining heavily in the morning. There's bad weather hampering the air effort. By this point, they've got to cross the river. 30 Corps being this nearby, is the air cover is starting to come closer. That the controllable air cover, it's the start of the battle, the controllable air cover is not in contact with Arnhem because it's too far away.
Got it. Yeah.
But, all these creeping benefits of 30 Corps being closer by. So everyone will have also noticed that the Poles have not arrived on Wednesday. Their gliders may have arrived on Tuesday, but the parachute Poles don't arrive on Wednesday. I think it's worth doing a little detour into who
these people are and what are they doing and why are they ending up in Arnhem, not in Poland?
Well, that's a very good question. So they're the first independent Polish parachute brigade. And the first thing to know about these people is they're not like British Airborne Forces. They are not volunteers. They're just the people that Sosabowski's got. His view is, why should only the brave die? He's like this sort of fantastic character. They're training in Fife. He invents the thing called the Malky Gap, which is the trainasium in the trees. He invents that, the obstacle course in the trees, that then the British steal and that is still used now.
And don't give him credit for.
Of course not, no. They have colours sanctified in Warsaw and that they're then smuggled to them. They also given some colours by the ladies of Fife, which they appreciate but don't value quite the same as their colours from Warsaw. I mean, who these people are Poles who have, at the start of Barbarossa, they've been released from the Gulag, essentially. Most of them have come through
Romania,
Iran,
presumably.
and come all the way around the world.
Oh, so they've done the same thing as the 2 Polish Corps in Italy.
Yeah. They're those kind of people, right? So they're very, 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 very keen on fighting Germans, and they're very, very keen on being dropped on Warsaw. They want to be involved in Warsaw. Now, of course, this is super political. At the same time, Churchill realizes they have this incredible political value. There may only be like a couple of thousand of them. And the Home Army, by the time the Home Army sort of comes to maturation, is 750,000 people. So 2,000 parachutists. What difference will it make, right? Yeah. But the difference it will make is it looks like British involvement, patronage, sponsorship of a Polish resistance effort. So Sosabowski spends 2 years pretty much as he's putting this brigade together, and the British won't let him have access to aircraft. They can't train with the right aircraft. They can't drop. Browning keeps trying to get them to come to Salisbury Plain so he can have them under his wing and sort of draw them into his orbit. So he's got a sort of bigger and shinier portfolio of airborne soldiers to sort of show off about. Sosabowski's always rebuffing Browning over and over and over and over again. And then come August, they're finally placed under British command because you've got Poles fighting in Italy. You've got Poles fighting in Normandy by this point, Matzek's people. He can't stay out any longer of an Allied effort in Northwest Europe, Sosabowski. And by God, he's tried. But the minute he's brought under British command, he's given Dakotas to practice with. Eric Down, who's the sort of very hard-nosed parachute expert.
He was going to be...
Exactly, divisional commander, who's the most abrasive man in the British Army. That's
the one, yeah.
He joins Sosabowski and helps get the guys up to scratch. So there is an effort to sort of help once they're part of things. But their men have been on hunger strike because the Warsaw Uprising has happened. They're on hunger strike because they're not going to Warsaw. There's a lot of bad feeling within the Polish setup. Also, Sosabowski is renowned for, at briefings, saying, well, this will never work, or where'd you come up with this? And Hackett at one point says, a British general would not, at a briefing, would not be able to talk the way you do. You've got this amazing leeway of being able to say, this is balls, in a way that none of us are allowed to. So at Comet, he's very, very vocal about what he thinks of Operation Comet, and he's very vocal about Market Garden as well. And particularly on Comet, which is the operation preceding Market Garden, that gets amplified to Market Garden. Hackett is stunned by this.
Is Sosabowski always right? I mean, he is this legendary figure. Is there a question that actually he's too cussed for his own good?
I think there may be an element of that.
But it's also a bit like de Gaulle, isn't it? It's, if you want everyone to cooperate with you, just be really rude and arrogant and annoy them.
Yeah, well, possibly.
Maybe he played a slightly more diplomatic card. He might have got more...
May have got what he wanted. But I think Poles view the war differently. For them, it really is an existential war.
Yes, it is. But if you want to actually make an effort, if you want to contribute and you want to do it, and your hands are tied by the virtue of the fact you haven't got a country anymore and you're at the behest of a host nation, then getting on with the host nation is probably quite a good idea.
Yeah, maybe. One of the interesting things about this, though, is he has been promised that once he reaches, I think it's 5% casualties, they'll be withdrawn, they'll be regrouped, they'll be rebuilt, because the whole point is to save them up for something in Poland, right? If Market Garden goes to plan, they land once 30 Corps have got to Arnhem anyway.
Yeah. They're not quite so afterthought, but they're kind of part of the mopping up procedure.
They're reinforcements rather than the assault. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, they've been sat around, bad fog. They arrive at 1700 on Thursday afternoon because they get off to a delayed start. One battalion doesn't show up. 41 aircraft are turned back. So it's 114 C-47s, 41 turned back. And they're on a new drop zone. They're not by the bridge, which is where they're meant to go in the original plan. They're south of the Oosterbeek perimeter, east of a place called Driel. And there's a ferry at Heveerdorp that crosses the river. It's an opposed landing. They're under fire when they land. The Germans are all going, Jesus Christ.
Is there any thought at this point that actually they're already stuffed, so let's just bin it?
No, it's still going.
Okay.
You see, because after all, Browning is in Oosterbeek, tangled up in all that. There's no one overlooking the whole thing, making those decisions.
But they must know it's all going pear-shaped at Arnhem.
You'd think so. So they land, they're under attack. The German reaction is, oh shit, more paratroopers. God, what are we going to do, right? Will this never end? The Germans react to the Polish landings, which takes pressure off Oosterbeek. They get to the ferry. The ferry's gone. The ferryman has sunk it to deny its use to the Germans. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, okay.
And 34th SS Volunteer Grenadier Division Landsturm Nederland, Machine Gun Battalion 47, and other Kampfgruppen.
They sound high quality.
They do sound like some of the best people. We've got our very best people on it. But basically, the British see they see them land because it's that close. Private Ernest Henry Archer swims the Rhine with a message. The British say we're going to provide rafts to get you across. The Poles wait by the southern bank, but 0300, there are no rafts, and they withdraw to Driel. What you've got is now this sort of pregnant thing with some Poles on the south, the 30 Corps starting to head to catch up with the Poles. So Urquhart tidies up his lines within the perimeter. Hackett's given the eastern side to command, Hicks the western side. I mean, it's not a defensive line either. It's mutually protecting positions. Again, there are gaps in it. There are holes in it. And it's about 3 miles all the way round, and it's defended by 3,600 men, roughly, which, given Urquhart has brought just over 10,000 men to Arnhem and has, by this point, lost 8 of his 9 infantry battalions. You're talking about it's all the world and his wife doing the fighting now.
Desperate stuff.
Yeah. Hermann Goering NCO School attacked the border positions on the west side near the Rhine, forcing them to abandon the high ground overlooking the Rhine at the Worcester Buing, where there's a restaurant there now. And there was only one company there, which is cut off. But contact is made with the 64th Medium Regiment, Royal Artillery of 30 Corps.
And that's through radio, presumably.
That's through radio, and that's through one of those conversations. Did you know Squiffy at Sandhurst? It's another one of those sort of...
Yeah.
Oh, yes, what a lovely chap. To establish confirmation of who's who. And that radio link is then used as a main line of communication to 30 Corps.
Bold left arm, there's all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So 30 Corps' guns are online. How long can 1st Airborne Division now hold out? Well, we'll come to that in part 2.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. We're into the last few days in the Arnhem battle, and this is going to sound like a daft thing to do, but we have a map that we're going to talk about in front of us.
Yeah, I like this.
And what's good about this map is very often the Arnhem maps that you will see don't have who the Germans are in them. And this is from an absolutely brilliant, groundbreaking book called It Never Snows in September.
Yeah, the Bob Kershaw one.
Bob Kershaw, which is about the German perspective.
Salisbury man, incidentally.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he lives in Salisbury, he lives in Arnhem.
Ah, right, there we go.
Or Lower Bemerton, I should say.
Brilliant. So his map not only has where everyone is in the Arnhem perimeter, but it's who's around them, which German formations are coming at them.
Spindler, Möller, Dombrowski, von Olvorden.
Exactly. The Vorosky Battalion of Hermann Goering, the Reichsarbeitsdienst.
The police company, that's never a good sign, is it?
Exactly. And that you do have these SS people, and it's being organised by the SS. But what you've got is an NCO school. You've got pioneers. You've got all these different people, all part of the effort to reduce the perimeter. And while you've got the Border Regiment holding holding most of the western side of the perimeter, then you've Royal Engineers as you go around. If we're going clockwise, from the river clockwise, it's 1st Border Battalion, the companies of that. Then there's some sappers, glider pilots, 21st Independent Company, who are then moved and fed into the middle of the line.
You've still got the Kampfgruppe Kraft with 2 Fs.
Yeah,
still
exactly.
Pressing south. He hasn't really moved from where he started off. He's been on that
he's
side
in exactly
of the
the
railway.
same place. Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah. But there's pressure from all sides is the point.
Yes.
And again, you get heroism like the likes of Mike Dauncey, Lieutenant Mike Dauncey of the Glider Pilot Regiment. Now, Dauncey was nominated for a VC, but didn't get it, right? But the stuff he gets up to, he's shot at one point.
Yes.
And a splinter goes in his eye. So the man with him tries to remove it with a pair of matchsticks.
Oh, my God. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine? I'm sort of wincing just thinking about it.
And he says he gets this pink mist and thinks, oh, no, I can't see out that eye anymore, right? So he goes to the dressing station at Cape Terhorst, checks himself out eventually. And then he says, the wound didn't really stop me. And as the enemy were clearly going to make a major thrust, we busied ourselves on our defences. As the morning wore on, the ominous squeak of enemy tanks began to get louder and louder. One of the parachutists gave me a gammon bomb, and armed with this, I went up the road accompanied by another airborne soldier to await the tank's arrival. Eventually, a tank came into sight, and I ran forward and threw the bomb. Nothing happened for a long time, and I began to wonder if it was ever going to explode. Then suddenly, there was an enormous blast. Dust was everywhere. The tank didn't move. I just hoped and prayed it had done enough damage. Certainly, it stayed stationary. When I looked around, though, my comrade had gone. As I didn't feel I could do very much more with only a German Luger pistol in my hand, I made my way back to a group of soldiers a little behind me, and we formed a place to stop the enemy infantry. More tanks soon began to roll into the vicinity. We threw a few grenades in their direction, and they threw 1 or 2 at us. Slowly but surely, the enemy crept towards us, and I was hit in the thigh by a bullet that fortunately just went straight in and out. It certainly made me fall, but it didn't break my leg. The time had now come to seek refuge in a slip trench. Wandering around the battlefield had become a very bad idea. On taking shelter, I suddenly heard a noise to my left and looked down to see a German stick grenade beside me. It went off and broke my jaw in 3 places. Amazingly, I could still think all right, but I couldn't very easily speak, and my face was a mess. I mean, these people.
These people. Yeah. It's
extraordinary.
It's just incredible. And obviously, this is written after the event and stuff, so he's... Yeah. The sheer terror and the fear and all the rest of it is gone. And, he can add that wry insouciance. But even so.
Yeah.
It itched a bit. Yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So come Friday, the Germans have put
Friday the 22nd of September.
Friday the 22nd. They put a blocking line on the railway line south of the river to shut the poles off from the bridge. Then the Household Cavalry appear. Then
Hooray.
4th, 7th Dragoon Guards. Then the DCLI. It's Second Army, folks. They're in town. And it's the 43rd Wessex Division under Ivor Thomas von Tomar. So the Poles are now in contact with Second Army. And, Second Army's guns are breaking up attacks. And, the Fus in Arnhem are literally calling in fire to the opposite side of the street and stuff. Like, they're calling in fire on their own positions, all that sort of thing. It's really, really hard stuff.
So when you say they appear, they're literally just on the opposite side of the Rhine.
Yeah.
Oh,
right there.
Man, it's so close, isn't it, really?
It is close.
It's so close yet so far.
Yeah, exactly. Are we groping towards the way of expressing that, are we? Is it a bridge to? No. Anyway.
Yeah, well, what? Stop it.
But Bittrick decides now to really apply the pressure because he's contained the Polish effort with that blocking line. So Kampfgruppers are coming in from all over. He pulls the KOSB further down because they're sort of stuck out on their own, and puts the independent company, moves them around to the centre of the line. And we were sent not so long ago a map of the independent company positions that a veteran's son sent us, with a house called the Sore Thumb because it was out on its own. It was the thing attracting all the attention from the Germans. The Commander Royal Engineers, CRE, Eddie Myers, who had previously been in the Balkans with SOE blowing stuff up.
Yeah. Operation Animals.
And got sacked because he'd basically got too close to the wrong people in the Balkans. He swims the river to see Sosabowski. There's an attempt to bring the Poles over by boat with 6 rubber dinghies. Only 55 make it across, 20 of whom don't make it to the perimeter. Efforts to relieve aren't up to it. On day 7, on the Saturday, the 23rd, the more pressure we exerted from all sides on the encircled enemy, the fiercer his resistance grew, the Germans
Amazing.
note. The Germans, under Spindler, they tried to cut the bottom of the perimeter off from the river. And suddenly, Allied fighter bombers, Yarbos, appear with a break in the weather and break that attack up. So suddenly the Air Force are in evidence.
So you have this sort of crazy situation, don't you, where you have the Allies just totally dominating the skies. And yet in this particular pocket here at Arnhem, it's just not enough.
It's not enough. And also because you've created a situation that sits outside that capability.
Yeah.
But 0300, the Poles try to cross again with fire support from 43rd Wessex Division. 153 men are able to cross. So, and given the fumes Urquhart's running on, 150 guys is something to celebrate. It's still nothing like enough. On day 8, on the Sunday, Horrocks now visits the Poles, and there's a conference attended by Browning, Thomas, and Sosabowski. At this conference, they turn on Sosabowski and they start to blame him for not fighting properly or something, right? And it becomes clear at this meeting, at this conference, that he is going to be the lightning rod for this stuff. And at the same time, Horrocks has other problems because the corridor has been cut to the south. The Germans have actually managed very, very briefly to cut the corridor to the south. So,
Clearly they're completely wrong in turning on Sosabowski, but if you're constantly acting as an outrider, then don't be surprised if you're treated as an outrider when
I'm sure, yeah.
the proverbial hits the fan.
I do feel really, really, really sorry for him because by this point of the operation, as you said, Jim, they must know the game's up. Why even deploy them? What is the point?
Yeah, I don't know. It's absolutely crazy. Clearly, it's absolutely nothing to do with Sosabowski whatsoever, and he's doing all he absolutely can. The fact that his Poles are trying to get across it, the absurdity of trying to get across the river at this point, and the pointlessness of it, and the sacrifices his men are taking for something which is absolutely not going to help them win back Warsaw is hugely impressive.
So no wonder he's grumpy.
But I kind of, I don't think Sosabowski helps himself with his abrasive nature and his kind of constantly questioning things. And, I can see why he does it, but, that's not how to win friends in high places, is it?
But you've also got Ivor Thomas in this mix.
Who's an absolute, totally loathsome character.
Yeah, exactly. So, there's that to, Browning's got to cover his arse. There's all sorts of other things in the mix.
Von Thoma has huge form in blaming other people.
Yeah. Urquhart had run-ins with him before and does not like him.
No, with very good reason.
On the Sunday, Hackett's wounded in the stomach by a mortar. He's taken to the St. Elizabeth Hospital in the town in a disguise.
In Arnhem?
In Arnhem, yep.
How?
Because there's a truce on the wounded, so he's carted off. So basically, the ADMS, Graham Warwick, wants to call a truce for the wounded, goes to see Bittrick. They organise a truce, and he offers Warwick as many supplies as he can carry. In between 1,500 and 1,700 hours, there is a general ceasefire around the perimeter. 450 stretcher cases of walking wounded are taken to St. Elizabeth Hospital. And Hackett is taken to the hospital.
And presumably there's still RAMC people at the St. Elizabeth Hospital.
Yes, there are. Yeah. So, like Captain Alex Lippman-Kessel, who's a surgeon, and Hackett is brought to him as Corporal Hater. And he knows perfectly well who he is. And he says, I think I'll do this one, Lippman-Kessel says, and saves his life because he's a stomach wounds guy.
Yeah, and as we know, Germans don't have any trouble.
Germans don't have any time for that sort of stuff. Yeah, there's this truce. And the walking wounded are taken to the St. Elizabeth Hospital. The other thing is the British are still, the guns from south of the river are still shelling the Germans as they approach the Easterbeek perimeter. So you're still having that part of town shelled from south of the river as well. So the hospital's still in the middle of fighting. At 2200 hours, there's a planned crossing of the Poles 1st Battalion and the 4th Dorsets. And they're going to use ducks and they're going to use boats this time, right? And this is a sort of fig leaf by the Wessex Division to say that they've tried at least. The 4th Dorsets are offered up completely sacrificially.
And there's no chance of them going on the bridge because there's no one at the other end of the bridge, so what's the point?
No. I mean, what are you going to do? How are you going to break out of the Easterbeek perimeter? Because it's so small anyway. I mean, it's all very strange.
Well, yeah, but I suppose if you went back down to the road bridge and you got to the Arnhem Bridge and you cleared out the SS from there and they're all concentrated on Easterbeek, then you came round behind them.
Well, and then the Germans blow the bridge.
Yeah, all that.
That's the end of that. At 0100 hours, the boats and the ducks arrive, so they're late. The plan is then changed, so it's only the Dorsets are going to cross. 315 men embark, 200 are captured. Complete shit show. Among the Dorsets are Jimmy Grafton, who goes on to be Spike Milligan's publican and producer.
Amazing. There you go.
Tiny little showbiz bit there. So Sunday, we come to Sunday, which is the last day. At 0800, Urquhart, they're talking now.
This is Monday.
Sorry, Monday the 25th, the last day. At 0800, Urquhart accepts he has to withdraw, and he's been talking to Thomas, and he really doesn't like him, and makes a point of saying this. In his memoir, he says, I had to deal with him before. I really didn't like him, but I thought it was best to behave myself. Essentially, best to just get on with it.
Well, Stanley Christopherson always said he never met anyone with less of a sense of humour than Ivo Thomas.
Well, there we are. One of the things Urquhart had done at Staff College was a study of the withdrawal from Gallipoli. And he says, prides himself on having done that. You think, oh, great. So,
okay, that's all right then.
Oh, great. Another defeat. What he's going to do, it's going to be like a collapsing bag. So they're going to start at the top and bring the men out from the top.
It's actually the Dunkirk principle as well. It's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there are lines of tape laid, the walking wounded to keep firing. They leave everyone else behind. Still got to hold on all day before the evacuation that night. And at 10 o'clock, and it's a touch and go that day, 10 o'clock, Kampfgruppe von Alvorden, they get into the perimeter. They bust through in around the Tafelberg, and tanks get turned sort of left down towards south, down towards the artillery positions at the old church. And it's absolutely savage hand-to-hand fighting. Yeah. 75mm guns, the light regiment firing their guns over open sights. Really, really, a really bad attack. And it's broken up by Second Army guns, which just shows how vulnerable actually the perimeter is. And if the Germans were to make a concerted effort, we were talking about who the Germans are that have invested the Easterbeek perimeter. It's quite fortunate that they're not of particularly great quality, a lot of them, because otherwise this kind of breakthrough might have happened sooner and might have happened more conclusively. So come the evening, 2100 hours, it's heavy rain, there's shelling on German positions from south of the river. The men start to make their way to the exits. Some have to swim. There's harassing German fire, machine guns on fixed lines. Captain Ian Ogilvie of the Glider Pilot Regiment, who's one of the very, very famous Arnhem pictures, a man in his kilt getting onto a jeep. He's drowned, probably, it's reckoned, pulled down by his kilt. And he'd fought so gallantly with the glider pilots. Urquhart, interestingly, just joins the queue with everyone else. He doesn't insist on being the last man out, which you'd think he might. He just joins the line with everyone else, hand on shoulder the next
What do you
guy.
make of that?
I don't know what I make of it. I think it's interesting.
I don't think it's helpful for him to be captured.
It's not good for him to be captured, but there is also kind of like, he's the captain of his sinking ship. He has to be the last man out. But basically, by 0500, it's called Operation Berlin, this withdrawal. It ends. You've 2,163 First Airborne guys, 160 Poles, 75 Dorsets, several dozen others, including RAF crews, have been shot down because there's a Sterling crew who dig in with the artillery around the church on the Tuesday. 300 men are left behind on the northern bank when it stops.
And why is that? Because it's just run out of time.
You run out of time and the light comes. So it's daylight, and that's the end of that. 95 are killed in the process of this. So the next morning, the Germans discover the remnants. They discover there's no one there. There's 600 men, pockets of people. lots and lots of people. Because after all of these numbers, when we talked about a battalion reduced to 60 from 600, lots of these people are dispersed. They're hiding. They're dug in somewhere. They're cut off from their units. They're not all captured. So gradually, lots and lots of these British and Polish paratroopers and air landing guys coagulate together, sheltered by the Dutch underground. And then there's the mass breakout, Operation Pegasus, on the 22nd of October 1944, when they come back over the Rhine. I mean, that's the fate of the men. Urquhart goes to see Browning, who keeps him waiting and then appears absolutely immaculate. And Urquhart is not happy with the interview that Browning gives him one bit. Airborne legend says that Urquhart punched Browning to the ground.
And we all want that to be true.
We all want that to be true, but it probably isn't. But what we're looking at here in this action, 5 Victoria Crosses, 23 DSOs, 35 MCs.
Yeah, amazing.
14 DCMs, 50 military medals, 38 Distinguished Flying Crosses, including 5 Glider Pilot Regiment people.
Yep.
And the comedian Jimmy Edwards with his big moustache.
Yep. It's worth saying that the DCM is the NCO and other ranks version of the DSO.
Yes.
And the MM, the military medal, is the
equivalent of the military
NCO
cross.
and other ranks equivalent of the MC. Those have been abolished now, and quite rightly too. There's
amalgamated, that's right, yeah. But what you're looking at, the 1st Airborne, 1,174 killed, 5,903 captured.
Yep.
1,892 missing. That's a total 8,969, lost.
Yep.
From 219 glider pilots are killed, 92 Poles. It's appalling.
It's really, really bad.
368 RAF crewmen, 79 RASC guys of the supply drops killed.
Yeah.
9th Troop Carrier Command, 27 pilots lost, 30 corps. The total casualties are quite hard to come by. The German 2 SS Panzer Corps lists 3,300 casualties, but Bob Kershaw estimates that there's many more in the entire battle that can't be accounted for. And ultimately, 453 Dutch civilians are killed in the fighting, but then the Hunger Winter follows as part of the German reprisal.
Yes, of course.
Where Holland suffers appallingly.
It is a bridge too far because they don't get there.
Yeah.
But they do hold on to the areas south of the Rhine. I mean, that has to be admitted.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the detractors of Anzio.
Yeah.
Okay, it didn't achieve all it intended to achieve in January 1944 by any stretch of imagination. And yet it was absolutely critical to the eventual capture of Rome and the destruction of the German 14th Army. So any territory into gain from the enemy is incredibly useful. And, let's not forget that Operation Veritable, for example, which was due to be launched earlier in the autumn, but couldn't be because of the winter and bad weather, is launched from the island, effectively as it's called. And the island is this bit between the Waal and the Meuse. It's this sort of 10-mile, 8-mile stretch of land between these two rivers, north of Nijmegen, south of Arnhem.
Yeah.
And it's from there and from the area immediately east of Nijmegen, the Grosbeek Heights and all that Operation Veritable is launched. So it's not a complete waste of time by any stretch of imagination. And one has to remember you've got an Allied airborne army. And the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne, they do very well. And, it is not entirely without any silver lining at all.
No.
And yet,
No.
The thing that really struck me when I was reading your book out is the fact that the statistic is that 80% of all wounds are caused by artillery and mortar fire.
Yep.
And those are the two things that airborne soldiers don't really have. So you have to use them as a coup de main operation.
Yep.
And the key with a coup de main operation and with using airborne troops is that the gap between them arriving and the main force on the ground joining them is not too long. That's a very difficult ridgeline to walk.
Yeah.
And in this case, they just get it wrong. And you've highlighted, I think, with enormous clarity over this series where they get that wrong. There's fundamental problems of leadership in 1st Airborne Army and the construction of 1st Airborne Division, rather. Yeah. And the way they're organised, the lack of division cohesion, egos and conflicts of interest at the brigade levels and command levels. There's the confusion over the kind of the second lift, which is problematic. And yet one also has to remember that this stuff is still comparatively new.
It's brand new.
There haven't been that many airborne operations, and every single time they do one, they're going, okay, that bit doesn't work. Next time we'll make sure we do it this way.
And interestingly, I've been talking inevitably to my father about this because we're doing this series. The colonel who introduced me all those years ago to this battle. A historian he knows has discovered the command post exercise that 6th Airborne did in anticipation of the Rhine crossing, which is all about making sure that your comms work and that you're plugged in properly to Tactical Air Force.
And you don't have a second lift.
It's called Exercise Bomb, and they run a complete, just a command post exercise. No soldiers involved, beyond the people running it, making sure the communications are absolutely nailed down watertight for whatever they're going to do next. This is exactly the process. They do an airborne landing. They go, that bit works. That bit doesn't work. We need to take that out. And the Rhine crossing reflects this because they build into the glider plan for the Rhine crossing a load of coup de main stuff as well as a mass landing. And it's a daylight drop for Varsity. So they think, well, that's great. We're going to be able to see what we're doing and do coup de main, right? Perfect world. Except there's a smoke screen over the entire battlefield and no one can see a thing. So,
I think it could have worked.
I do too.
There's so many fundamental problems with the 1st Airborne one. But I still think the bridge at Nijmegen could have been secured on the night of the 17th.
Yeah.
It absolutely could have been secured on the night of the 18th, 19th, for D+1. And then when 30 Corps arrives in the morning of the 19th, they could have been hustled through and hurried towards the bridge. And they would have got there, say they got there by kind of, 11 o'clock on the 19th. That would have been in time for Frost and his battalion.
Yeah.
And his men holding the bridge. And that would have changed everything.
Yeah.
It would have changed absolutely everything. So I don't think it was completely insane. I don't think it was completely inevitable. Lots and lots of mistakes are made. And you'd have had to obviously make a lot fewer to make sure it worked. But the idea that it was a madcap idea that could never have worked, that had no chance, and it was, Montgomery's arrogance and, his vainglory and all this kind of stuff. I don't buy any of that.
No.
I don't. I think the objective of winning the war by Christmas is a really, really good one. And let's not forget, and we will go into this in some detail in 2025, and certainly in the first half of 2025, let's not forget the absolute horror of the fighting in 1945, which reaches new levels of violence, appallingness, destruction. Without this, you don't have Dresden, you don't have Fort Syme, you don't have these totally brutal battles that are taking place, into Germany. You don't have half the destruction in Germany that you end up with at the end of the war. You don't have all that misery. You're saving more lives in concentration camps and death camps. So how can anyone suggest that Market Garden is not launched with laudable aims?
Well, in good faith.
In good faith. It is an entirely understandable, legitimate and reasonable operation, I think, in the circumstances to launch. And I think criticism of it is entirely brought about with hindsight and not looking at the circumstances on the ground as it seemed to them at the very beginning of September. Yes, they could have done it a week earlier. Yes, there's all sorts of things they could have done better. Absolutely. I think the bridge at Nijmegen, I think R.G. Paulson, who's written about this and has a massive bee in his bonnet about it, I think he's right about it. But it'll be really interesting, won't it, having concluded this series, now knowing what we know again and having advanced our understanding of this operation just that bit more in the last 18 months, and for you, an awful lot. To then go back out there again and reassess it from a kind of, a terrain point of view and looking at it on the ground and seeing it all kind of wrapped up into kind of one homogenous whole. So I'm excited about going back out.
I can't wait.
This has just been a fantastic series and to do and to study. And thanks for doing all that work on it, Alex.
No. And to you, Jim. The thing is there is so much going on. I mean, that's the other thing. There are so many moving parts and also that have all been raked over countless times. Because you think of any army scale or divisional corps-sized operation in Normandy that no one knows about, that goes on for twice as long as any of this, which is as important to the destruction of the here in Northwest, Jupiter, Epsom, all those epic battles that get a sentence in a lot of books, and Market Garden gets all this focus on it. And again, some of the things we've talked about just now explain why, because maybe it's a moment where things can change quite quickly, and after all, the aim is to get the whole house of cards to fall in on itself. And if you're the Allies, post the Stauffenberg assassination attempt, post Mad Tuesday, in Holland, the picture does look like Germany's about to collapse.
Well, Al, I'd take you back to that quote that we had in the second episode at the beginning from the SHAEF intelligence report up to Saturday the 16th of September, which says they are not capable of holding a decent defence. physically, it's impossible because they're not getting enough tanks, they're not getting enough men through.
Yeah.
They simply cannot possibly be able to do this anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Frankly, they've got a point.
Yeah, but they've got a point, and particularly everyone is looking at the last time Germany was on the brink of collapse in 1918 and thinking, well, we're doing a lot better than, than we were in November.
I know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Why do countries, nations surrender in war? They do so because they've run out of money, they've run out of resources and manpower, and they're not going to win. And that's why Germany throws in the towel, the Central Powers throw in the towel in November 1918. But that is not the rules that Hitler is using and his Nazi regime in the back end of the war, unfortunately. But anyway.
But there we are. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this series. And there's more to come from Arnhem itself and Oosterbeek and Grave and Nijmegen and Naval and all that.
Yep, and also on World War II Walking the Ground, which will be on YouTube in due course. I think we'll be on YouTube by the anniversary in September. So there's that as well.
So you can have a look as well as have a listen.
Yes.
Thank you very, very much for listening to this series so far. If you want to listen to it in one giant digestible lump, then go to our iTunes, our Apple channel, which is Officer Class. You pay a small fee and you find yourself not with the adverts and everything curated in one place.
Less than a cheap coffee at Starbucks.
Less than a cheap coffee in Starbucks. Less than a pint of Guinness out here on the western coast of Ireland as well.
Well, I'd say less than 50% of a pint of Guinness.
Yeah. Anyway, or go to our Patreon, subscribe, become a patron. Thanks very much for listening. We will see you again very soon. Cheerio.
Cheerio.
Arnhem. Black Tuesday, 24 hours in the Battle of Arnhem. From me, Al Murray. Now, if you're familiar with me, and we have ways of making you talk, you know I do everything I can to crowbar the Battle of Arnhem into every conversation. Well, here it is, the full crowbar. Arnhem Black Tuesday, out now in hardback, ebook and audio.